All right, joining us now live from Sydney is Tanveer Ahmed. He's a columnist with the Sydney Morning Herald newspaper, as well as being a qualified psychiatrist. He's also tried his hand at stand-up comedy in the past. More on that later, but we want to start with a serious issue. Thank you, Tanveer Ahmed. That's the issue of race. We've already had an analyst on the programme telling us that there's a worry that race could become an issue as this campaign gets really bare-knuckled and it becomes a bit of a race to the bottom. Is that a concern of yours?
Yeah, I think there is a fear of that. It didn't appear that way, say, several months ago, but I think asylum seekers in particular has become a major issue. And probably in the past, say, 6 to 12 months, population has become a very major debate. Just the idea that Australia cannot support more than a certain number of people, and often the figure thrown around is, say, 25, 30 million people. And it's based on an idea that Australia is the least fertile country in the world. It has distinct water shortages, etc. And from that, there is increasing fears about immigration. Now, that's, I guess, a more environmental view, but there's still an underlying racial element. And at the moment, asylum seekers, which I think to the outside viewer, to the rest of the world, seems relatively small issue in terms of the numbers. The numbers of asylum seekers that come to Australia are minuscule compared to global standards. But it requires a symbolic element, I think. I think people see television pictures of asylum seekers and it becomes a symbolic issue, probably primarily related to non-white migration and more particularly probably to Muslims, because a large percentage of them have come from Afghanistan or Pakistan or Iran in recent years, and certainly the broader populace, a lot of the population, I think, see the issue in relation to an Islamophobia, which is probably the dominant fear of migration at the moment.
Right. Dr. Ahmed, I was actually in Australia just about a week ago, and I remember reading in the Saturday Financial Review a column that surveyed Australian opinion about their identity. This has become something of a soul-searching exercise, this political season. Why is that? Because in most countries, election campaigns are really more about issue than identity.
You know, I think that's a great question. I think we have to understand Australia is a young country and it's a rapidly changing country. So you've had big waves of migration. It's arguably the most multicultural nation in the world. Sydney and Melbourne have the highest proportion of overseas-born people as a proportion in the world. And I know Australia also has the highest rate of mixed marriage in the world. So arguably it's the most multicultural country in the world. And I think that has caused distinct changes in Australian culture and its diversity and how people may view themselves. So from that point of view, there is this sort of debate, are we distinctly, say, Eurocentric, essentially derived from Britain, essentially a white Christian Protestant country, and should we maintain those values very strongly? Are we egalitarian? There's always that sort of debate. With the more current debate, that are we actually, in fact, increasingly part of Asia while we remain European in terms of institutions? Are we less and less egalitarian, far more global, individualist? Australia often sits between Britain and America, and it's not quite sure which way it should tilt. So I think it's more an indication of how young the country is, how rapidly changing the country is, and where it sits in the globe, with the sort of geopolitics globally. Where does Australia sit? I think it's a reflection of that.
All right. It does sound like this campaign could turn into a matter of some concern for non-white communities in Australia, but I wanted to ask you something that would touch on your comedy background as you look forward to this political campaign. It does look like it's going to be very colourful and feisty. Is there anything to be found that could be amusing about it?
Oh, look, election campaigns are full of humour, particularly these days where, particularly in Western countries, where it's all conducted on television. So the prospect for humour is immense. Julia Gillard, you just heard her, there's already been lots of cracks about her haircut. She's a redhead. She has a wardrobe budget now. A great quote I heard about her was that she has the mind of a barrister but the mouth of a bricklayer. And there's an industry in impersonations of Julia Gillard. Her opposition, Tony Abbott, is a former priest. He's been photographed recently in what are called Speedos, which are quite skimpy underwear. He's often parading around in underwear. He's a former boxer, Oxford boxer, who's also spoken publicly about an illegitimate child. So the prospect for an entertaining election campaign is considerable, and I look forward to it.
Thanks very much indeed. Live from Sydney, Tanveer Ahmed, columnist with the Sydney Morning Herald newspaper. Still to come on the programme.